Good morning, everybody. Martin Flanagan here from Arcus Corporate Brokers, and you're very welcome to the webinar this morning. I'm lecturing on behalf of Chartered Accountants Ireland this morning on the topic of cyber liability insurance and how that works, what it means. We'll take a look at a couple of examples of claims and some large-scale recent attacks as well in the country. Just give an overview of how this type of insurance can save your business if the worst case happens in the event of an IT system failure. Just to give you a very, very brief introduction to myself, my name is Martin Flanagan, as I said. I'm an account director with Arcus Corporate Brokers. I've been working in insurance for over 15 years now, I think, at this stage. And a key area of expertise of my own has been cyber insurance over the last number of years, and indeed other financial lines, forms of insurance, such as professional indemnity as well. I'm the incumbent president of the Insurance Institute of Galway, and I've regularly lectured on behalf of the Insurance Institute of Ireland, NUI Galway, and indeed I've taken part in presentations for Chartered Accountants Ireland as well. So what I'll do is I'm just going to throw up our slides here in a moment, just give you a quick overview of who Arcus are as well. And what we'll do is, if there are any questions, please throw them into the chat box. And then at the end of the discussion, we can address all the questions at the end of the presentation. So I'll close the slides down, open it up to the floor. And if anybody has any questions, just throw them in. Okay, so I'm just going to start sharing my screen here now, if you give me 2 moments. Okay, guys, so just give you a quick overview of who Arcus are. I mean, we could very well have some of our clients on the call today, but for those of you who haven't heard of us or aren't familiar with us, just to give you some history as to where the business has come from. So Arcus was started out as a small family-run insurance brokerage in 1969. And since then, it's gone through a very sustained period of growth, especially over the last, say, 15 odd years. We've sought like-minded, similar businesses who share the same value and spirit as ourselves. And we've seen some significant growth over the last 5 years in particular with some key acquisitions. And what that has meant is that we are now the largest insurance broker in the country. So of, say, the commercial lines insurance market, we have about a 20% share of that. So gives us a lot of influence in the market. It means that we can innovate for our clients and bring forward products that you wouldn't necessarily obtain elsewhere, which is a great thing to be a part of and a great thing to be able to help develop those kind of innovative alternatives for clients on a very regular basis. So we annually were placing 550 million in premium into the Irish insurance market. We have over 700 employees across 15 offices around the country and over 200,000 customers. And we are part of the Arduna Group, which is a UK-based international insurance brokerage, which gives us a reach all around the world, but it also gives us access to a lot of expertise as well from specialist teams in London, in Portugal, in the Netherlands, which means we can pool together our knowledge and again, just to innovate and to bring forward products and benefits to clients that you may not otherwise be able to obtain. So that's just a little bit about who we are. But the most important piece about this morning is talking about cyber insurance, cyber attacks, and how to protect your business. So what I'd like to start off with on that topic is just to take a look at some recent large-scale examples of attacks which have taken place in Ireland over the last number of years. So if we take a look at these 3 examples, okay, and starting first with the Fastway Couriers attack. This happened a couple of years ago, whereby over 400,000 Fastway customers had their personal information accessed by an unknown third party. Now, at the time, not a huge amount of clarity was provided as to what exactly happened, only that it was likely a sophisticated hacking attack. However, there was a lot of talk around the fact that it may simply have been as simple as someone stumbling across their database online and seeing that it was freely accessible and not in any way encrypted. Now, in that case, had there been a full investigation, say from the Data Protection Commission, there could have been very serious repercussions in terms of fines which could have been imposed if Fastway were found not to have taken the proper measures to safeguard the data of those customers who had their information held on those servers. Now, the Lewis website attack is another fairly significant one which occurred in Ireland a few years ago. And what happened was an individual claimed to have contacted Lewis directly about security exposures they had uncovered on their website. And this is in the hope that he may be contracted to carry out some work for them. Now, Lewis didn't respond, and in vengeance, this person, or persons indeed, hacked the Lewis website and posted a message on their website saying, "You are hacked. Some time ago, I wrote to you that you have serious security holes. You didn't reply, and the next time someone talks to you, press the reply button." The hacker then went on to ask for a ransom of $1 Bitcoin, which at the time was thousands of euro, and indeed it's increased in value since then. Now, the Lewis eventually took the site down and had the issue rectified. But it's funny how an individual went from being a crusader of IT security to a criminal very quickly. But it does also show the knock-on effect that something like this could potentially have. Because when he hacked into the website, he was also able to gain the access to personally identifiable information, or PIIs as is used in the say insurance world to refer to that. He was able to access the information of over 3,000 members of the public who were given their personal details to sign up to a newsletter for the Lewis. And again, from a data breach perspective, that could have had an enormous loss for the Lewis, both in terms of potential fines, but also if cases are brought against them from individuals in terms of their information being freely available online. As you have an enshrined right under GDPR to seek compensation if you have been financially damaged as a result of a data breach. Now, I suppose the biggest incident that we've seen hit Ireland over the last number of years, and the one that probably sticks in all of our minds, is the HSE attack, which, I mean, we all vividly remember it, and even we're still almost talking about it to this day, even though it was a few years ago. And healthcare services across the country were impacted in what was the most serious cyber attack to ever hit the state's critical infrastructure. And just to give a very brief explanation of what happened, a type of malicious software was found on the HSE's IT system, and this was installed after a staff member opened a link which was allegedly from their IT support, but of course it wasn't. It was a criminal gang based outside the country. Now, whilst the employee engaging with someone who they thought was helping them resolve the IT issue, malicious software was actually being installed on the HSE servers. So they were speaking to somebody outside of the country on essentially a chatbot. And through this functionality, they were installing malicious software on their systems. And this software allowed the hackers to move within the HSE's network and spread their computer virus. And this was allegedly done by a criminal gang called Conti, who are based in Eastern Europe. The type of software that they use was developed a number of years ago, and it's very prevalent as well in cyber attacks on other states and semi-state bodies in other countries. So this particular type of software not only blocked access to files, it also stole information, making it more dangerous, especially when we consider the type of information that the HSE holds. Now, as we know as well, medical procedures were halted, and hospitals throughout the country took months to get back to what they consider a somewhat normal state of operations. Now, estimates for the cost of the damage range from 100 million to 500 million, and all because somebody followed a link that they shouldn't have. Now, also, we look at the estimates for this cost, but then there's a personal cost as well that we have to think of in terms of people who missed appointments, people who may have become more ill as a result of not being able to attend a clinic because they could not treat them for whatever reason for software being damaged. So it was an incredibly serious attack on the health system. Now, one interesting point as well to note is that there are an estimated 180,000 entry points to the HSE's IT system. So that could be employee emails or websites, etc. Now that's 180,000 potential vulnerabilities. Now, if we look at a smaller business, that number would be, of course, much less. But if we were to try and quantify that figure for our own businesses, we'd probably think twice about our IT protection and getting cyber insurance, because we just don't simply realize the number of potential avenues that an external source could gain access to our business's systems. So, in the context of those examples that are just given in those sort of cases, how would cyber insurance have helped? So, if we look specifically at the HSE, so HSE cyber experts investigated where and how the breach occurred, and these investigating costs will be covered. Cyber experts monitored the dark web for signs of a data breach. This would also be covered by a cyber policy. IT specialists made sure the system is secure against further attack, which would also be covered. And HE staff were assisting in the process. This additional cost for that would also be covered by a cyber policy. Now, again, these coverages vary from insurer to insurer, and we'll touch on that a little bit later as well. But it's just to be cognizant of that not every cyber policy is the same, in the same way that not every office policy is the same as well. Now, there are also reports that Ireland could be exposed to increased cyber attacks following the war in Ukraine over the last couple of years. There's a potential for Russian state-backed hacking of companies in Ireland connected to Ukrainian business. Now, some of you may remember the NotPetya cyber attack back in 2017, which primarily targeted Ukrainian businesses, but costed millions of euros worth of damage globally. Now, an interesting point as well, just in relation to cyber attacks and the war in Ukraine, there was what seemed to be some positive data last year and the year previous, which indicated that the level of ransomware attacks had actually fallen somewhat. But then when you delve into that information a little bit more, it was found over the last 12 months that that drop off in ransomware attacks internationally was as a direct consequence of Russian state-backed hackers focusing more so on Ukraine and the regions surrounding that than elsewhere in the world. So ransomware is actually beginning to creep up again in terms of its prevalence for cybercrime, having dropped off moderately in a couple of years previous. But cyber criminals could take advantage of a situation by targeting not just businesses, but individuals as well. Conning people out of their money or their personal details through phishing emails claiming to be from international aid organizations, or through infected videos or emails claiming to provide information on different crises. So we've seen some pretty significant hacking attacks on large organizations in Ireland and across the world over the last few years. We've also heard about some very serious data breaches as well. And whilst these cases help to spread awareness of the types of incidents which can occur, I think part of the problem that we still have is that we often only think of this in the context of these large organizations and enormous businesses. But cyber risks are now a fact of life for any business dealing with electronic data, and the threats can come from a wide range of sources, from negligent employees to organized criminal gangs. So just to take a look at some statistics as well. So as we know, as we said, it's not just large companies which are being affected. So cybercrime is the most prevalent economic crime in Ireland at 69%, which is double the global average. This means that every day, SME businesses are exposed to this threat. Criminals are targeting the most vulnerable and not the most valuable. The frequency of cyber attacks in Ireland has increased by 26% year on year, according to the Hiscox Cyber Readiness Report. And it's actually a very interesting report, which is available on the Hiscox website, which gives you an overview of just how prevalent an issue cyber attacks are in Ireland and indeed in the rest of the world. So, according to the report, 49% of businesses say they suffered a cyber attack in the past 12 months compared to 39% in the prior year. So, it's increasing all of the time. Now, this is a hugely significant finding given that Ireland is now Europe's largest data hosting cluster. And some estimates state that up to 30% of electronic data relating to EU citizens is stored on servers which come under Irish jurisdiction. And although we have a significant amount of tech companies in Ireland, what we have seen is that cyber incidents can occur across the full spectrum of industries. So it's a huge issue in Ireland. And I think in insurance terms, we've often been referring, even recently, to cyber as being an emerging risk. But I would say it's not an emerging risk anymore. It's emerged. But what it is an evolving risk. So it's very different to any other form of risk which you try to insure. So if you look at it, I mean, a fire policy, they've been around. The insurance first started out as fire insurance policies in London hundreds of years ago, and they've evolved in such a certain way because fire damage, it's fairly easy to track in a certain respect because there's so much data about it over the last number of years. We know all about the construction materials of a property. We know what type of insulation material has been used and the spreadability of fire if it was to catch a flame. But with cyber insurance, given that the types of software which are being developed to carry out these attacks is constantly changing. So it's a risk which is very, very difficult to underwrite given how much it's evolving on a regular basis. So it's one which you really need to be insured with and working with insurance companies who have the requisite expertise. One of the key problems that I've seen in cyber insurance over the last number of years is that if you look at back, say, 15 odd years ago, there was a small number of cyber insurers in Ireland and the UK. And then a decade later, there was in excess of 60. Now, if you look at it, in the space of 10 years, you couldn't possibly have the number of experienced and knowledgeable underwriters that you would need in an insurance company to have come on board in the space of a decade. It simply wouldn't have happened. So what occurred was that a number of insurers were, say, dipping their toes into the cyber insurance market with some relatively inexperienced underwriters, and that led to some substantial losses. So we've had, over the last 10 years, as a result of these increased losses, a very hard market for cyber insurance, which essentially means restrictive cover and higher premiums. Now, there is a relative sense of positivity over the last 12 months, given the fact that premiums have begun to get to a more stable pricing point. They are more expensive than they were 5 or 6 years ago, but they're at a level now where insurers believe that the underwriting is adequate and correct, which, although more expensive than 5 to 6 years ago, is positive in terms of stability going forward for clients, which is a key element to make sure that your insurers are going to be there in a few years' time as well. Now, just to look at some cyber claims by industry. So this table of data is provided by AIG Insurance, and this gives us an idea as to what sectors are being targeted more prevalently than others. And as you can see, it's professional and financial services are two of the key industries which are being targeted. So that is, unfortunately, the likes of accountants, the likes of architects, and the likes of solicitors as well, given the type of information that those businesses can tend to hold. Now, again, you may not be fully reliant on your IT systems to trade. You might be able to go without them for a couple of days, but it's a knock-on effect of a third party gaining access to your systems and the information that they may be able to gain as well and use that against you. That's one of the key problems around this. This information here is also provided by AIG, and it gives us an idea of the type of claims which are typically impacting businesses. So you have the business email compromise as being one of the main areas. And business email compromise is when a third party can gain access to your company Outlook account or whatever email account it may be that you use. And they will monitor emails going in and out and look to siphon off funds, for example, through invoice manipulation. Now, to give an example of an unfortunate incident which occurred, and in fact, with a client of ours who was an accountancy firm, a malicious actor had gained access to their Outlook account by virtue of somebody within the business clicking a link they shouldn't have it with a PDF attachment, which allowed them to install software on the Outlook account and gain access to the principal's business account, his business email account. So what the malicious actor did was they set up a folder in the business owner's Outlook and set up rules for certain emails containing certain subject material to go into this folder. So they were essentially, they'd found a particularly lucrative transfer amount, transfer that was going to go through in a number of weeks. And this is the one they targeted. So they followed the emails going back and forth. So a bond payment was to be made, and the malicious actor then emailed the principal's executive asking them to transfer the money to X account. So it came from the principal email address. The executive was under a bit of pressure, was a bit stressed, and wanted to just get this done. So they ended up messaging the principal on Teams because he was caught up in a meeting, just saying, "Do you want me to transfer that amount?" Principal was also a bit stressed at the time, caught up with other matters, and just said, "Yes, just transfer it." So what happened was that the bond payment ended up being transferred to an account, an offshore account, controlled by these malicious actors, and it was a very substantial amount of money. It was 6 figures. But it just shows you how easy it is for just a number of factors to impact on your awareness of checking those bank details, not calling the other side to make sure the details are correct, not calling the principal to make sure he had sent that email. There's a whole host of factors that can impact your thinking. And there are estimates by a number of insurance companies that would say that almost 90% of the cyber incidents which are reported them, if you look at the root cause, is due to human error. So it's due to somebody not doing that check to make sure the bank details are correct. It's due to somebody clicking that email and opening up that attachment when they shouldn't have. But how does cyber insurance actually work? So if we think of it in the context of your comprehensive car insurance, so if you rear end somebody on the road, your car insurance will cover the damages to your vehicle. Likewise, if you suffer a social engineering attack, which damages your computer systems, a cyber insurance policy will cover these damages. Next, your car insurance will cover the damages to the other person's vehicle. That is the third party cover, as it's called. So cyber insurance policies can also cover damages to third parties for data breaches if you forward on a malicious email in error. Then if your car is off the road, your car insurer might provide a replacement car to keep you going. With a cyber policy, your loss of profits can be covered if you can't trade to keep you going as well. And that's if you can't trade as a result of your systems going down. So that's how it works in a nutshell. But what we'll take a look at now is the actual policy benefits and some common examples of exclusions as well. So extortion and ransomware demands are covered, and this is a key area as well. So this will cover the cost of paying a ransom demand where hackers use the threat to expose or destroy data that they've already compromised in order to extort money out of you as the victim. So we've already discussed the large-scale example of the HSE where that happened and there was a ransom demand there. This actually unfortunately happened in a company I previously worked in some time ago, where a staff member opened an attachment which spread a virus across the servers and locked us out of our files. Now, at the time, we were able to gain access to the information again through our IT security teams. But to make it worse, the same staff member following this incident ended up doing that twice more in the space of 6 months, which you can imagine the MD was not too pleased come the third occasion. Now, when it comes to ransomware as well, insurers will try to resolve the issue by other means first, if possible, by allowing access to the necessary experts so as not to promote the fact that ransoms will be paid. And there are also, I suppose, complications as well around anti-money laundering legislation, because if you are paying ransoms, is that seen to be funding terrorism as well, depending on where the source of that attack has come from? So, as I said, insurers will look to try and resolve the issue by other means first, but not to the detriment of the business. Ultimately, your insurer would want to get you back up and running as quickly as possible, because that will inevitably mean that they're paying out less in terms of claims as well. So it's essential for them to get you back up and running as soon as they can. So social engineering fraud and cyber crime can also be added in to cyber insurance policies. And it's just worth noting here as well from the outset that cyber crime, which includes social engineering fraud, say phishing scams, that type of thing, that is generally an add-on to a cyber insurance policy. And the usual limit for cyber crime is a maximum of €250,000. It's usually a sub-limit within your insurance policy. The reason being that these are the most common types of claims and the ones that tend to pay out more frequently. So they've sub-limited the crime to €250,000. That being said, typically speaking, for SME businesses, that would be a sufficient limit for cybercrime when we look at the average payouts for social engineering claims as well, which are typically between 20 to 50,000 euro, and that includes, say, recovery costs as well. But that's not to say that a business would not face a loss which is greater than that. And unfortunately, I have seen firsthand many examples of social engineering fraud attacks against companies. Now, one such example is a company and a client of mine where a member of the accounts team received an email which looked to be from Microsoft stating that their Outlook account had been suspended, but if they followed a link in the email and entered their email address and current password, access would be restored. So, without checking to see if their account had been suspended, the employee duly followed the link, entered their details, and carried on with their day. Now, as you can imagine, what they had actually done was follow a link to a website which looked like it was from Microsoft, but was actually controlled by a third party. And this third party now had access to the employee's email account, as their employer had not set up multi-factor authentication on the company email accounts. Now, we'll talk again about multi-factor authentication, but I think we all at this stage probably know what that is, and we may well have it in our businesses. But that's essentially where when you log on to your email, you may get a code to your phone as well, which you need to enter. It's having another added factor in there of checking to make sure you're the correct person who has access to that email account. Getting back to our example, once the third party had access to the emails, the hacker monitored emails coming in and out and selected some lucrative payments. In a very similar sort of circumstances to the accountant claim example we had a moment ago. So the third party, the hacker, changed the bank details and invoices going out and siphoned off the money to another offshore bank account. Now, over the course of 4 weeks, the company lost in excess of €370,000. And one of the largest payments as well for that was actually a bond payment which was coming from an insurance provider, and that insurance provider had not called to confirm that bank details were correct. So again, it's just showing you how easy it can be for something like this, for a fairly simple and straightforward protocol in terms of checking bank details not be carried out and the repercussions which can happen. Now, this type of incident would be covered under a cyber insurance policy, but as I've mentioned, insurers put a restrictive cap on the amount they will pay due to the huge number of claims being received. Now, there are other elements of cybercrime which can also be given. So, theft from online bank accounts, electronic fraud, and telecommunications fraud as well can be covered under a cyber insurance policy. Now, this is probably one of the, I suppose, the key areas in terms of cyber insurance and how important it is for a business. So, I suppose the incident response costs are an important element of any policy. I think it's in fact one of the most important pieces of a policy. And this is your first port of call in the event of something happening and trying to identify where a breach occurred. So the cost of investigating the cyber attack to identify where the breach occurred would be included. It covers the costs of IT security experts to help mitigate potential damage, and you will get access to legal experts to help manage the problem and give you advice, is say an example to the Data Protection Commissioner. That's available 24 hours a day, 365 days a year where possible. Okay, so sometimes there may be delays in getting in contact with a solicitor, for example, but they will be in contact as soon as they can. And this, to me, is a major, major benefit of a cyber policy because you may well have your own solicitor who you use for legal advice on a day-to-day basis. You have your IT security team, who I'm sure are excellent. But one thing I think we always forget is that your solicitor and your IT security team aren't dealing with major data breaches and cyber attacks on a very regular and almost daily basis, whereas your insurance company are. So they can work in tandem with your existing providers to help you react and recover from a cyber attack. So claims from third parties for a data breach as well it's an important element to cover, and this may become more important as well over time. So under GDPR, individuals have a right to claim for damages if their data has been breached. These claims for compensation are covered by a cyber policy. Now, we haven't seen any major cases go through the courts as of yet, but it is still being anxiously watched by insurers and companies alike. But it is worth noting that fines under GDPR will not be covered, but compensation claims are. So the fines are actually insurable in certain other jurisdictions in Europe. However, they are not in Ireland or the UK. And the reason being is that it would be against public policy for the insurers to do so. It would be the same as if your car insurer were covering speeding fines, as an example. Now, to run through an example of a data breach claim here. So it was a case of a private healthcare clinic who were the victim of a cyber attack where patient information had been stolen. So the hackers were threatening to post the data on a public website unless they received a ransom payment of €80,000 in Bitcoin. Now, the owner of the clinic immediately contacted their IT team, and next they called their cyber insurers. And the insurer's cyber incident response team engaged with the clinic's IT providers to try and mitigate the problem. Now, the insurer also engaged with a local IT forensic specialist who was able to visit the business in question and then start the process of verifying the attacker's claim. After an investigation of the clinic's network, the forensic specialist was able to advise that data relating to, I believe, in excess of 2,500 patients had been compromised. But it was a database containing names and addresses only. So no sensitive medical data had been accessed. So consequently, the decision was made not to pay the ransom demand. Instead, the insurer connected the company with a crisis communications consultant, so a PR consultant. This consultant advised them that it would still be necessary for the practice to notify affected patients, but to prevent any adverse reputational impact. And also then just to meet their obligations under GDPR reporting requirements as well. And since then, they've heard nothing from the hackers to date. But it shows sometimes that those hackers who've gained access to your systems, they may not have anything of value whatsoever, but it's the fear factor that's in play as well. So at least when you gain access to these experts, you can find out what exactly are they claiming. Is it true? Now, just before I move on to the common exclusions as well, business interruption is also a key area of cover under a cyber insurance policy. And the business interruption costs to the business, that'd be, say, if your system goes down and it needs to be repaired, restored, and recreated in the event of systems being damaged. Now, thankfully, a lot of us have backups to the cloud and all that as well, but it can still, if your systems go down, it can still have a fairly substantial impact on your business trading. So just to take a look here at some common exclusions under a cyber policy, and bodily injury and property damage. That is a common one, but there are complications around this as well in terms of why these are excluded and why you need to make sure that you're looking at these exclusions with your insurance broker to make sure there's no gaps in cover. So bodily injury is often excluded, as well as loss or damage to hardware or the physical property in relation to your IT systems. And this is generally because these losses may be covered by other insurance policies, such as your property policy for your office or your public liability insurance. But you should review the cyber insurance policies just to make sure that the wording is precise and that there are no gaps in coverage afforded by the other policies, just in case something was to occur. And the example I would give is that wouldn't say really might not affect an accountancy firm, but there are some businesses that face real risks of bodily injury or physical property damage due to a cyber incident, such as energy suppliers, manufacturers, or industrial businesses. And that's where you may need to look to amend the bodily injury or property damage exclusions. Now, insurers are building back in property damage coverage into some insurance policies as well, but you can also buy standalone policies for your PCs rather, which say restore the physical damage to them. Now, war and terrorism is generally always excluded as well from a policy, regardless of any other cause or event contributing to the loss. Although many cyber insurers will include an exception for cyber terrorism. Now, this particular exclusion did pose some problematic questions for insurers in recent years because in certain cases, the hackers are essentially semi-state bodies, if we look at those from Russia, and they're being sponsored by the state to attack, say, businesses associated with Ukraine or supporters of Ukraine. And is there the argument there that that is as a result of warfare? Now, there was examples of this in the US where exclusions were tried to be applied and it was found then that they could not be imposed. But it's a concerning one to watch and to look at the wording of that particular exclusion on your policy, because there could very well be instances again in the future, as it happened with the HSE and others, where Russian state bodies are essentially attacking the country. And is that, or could an insurer potentially try and identify that as a result of war? Now, more often than not, that particular exclusion has a caveat, which is allows, for instance, such as like that. It's more so if there's a full-on war against a country, as opposed to the knock-on effect of semi-state actors. Now, illegal or fraudulent activity will also generally be excluded. So if a business knowingly engages in illegal or fraudulent activities that lead to an incident, the insurer may deny a claim. So businesses must maintain a strong ethical culture and adhere to whatever legal and regulatory requirements to ensure their insurance coverage's validity. Now, another exclusion as well, and this isn't on every policy, which is again why it's important to review the coverage that's afforded to you, but failure to maintain security measures can also be an exclusion noted. So an organization may be obliged to maintain appropriate procedures and controls to protect against cyber attacks. So most importantly, when the cover is being presented, insurers are likely to require you to provide a substantial amount of detail in the form of a proposal form about security measures that you have in place. So it is important then just to review that in conjunction with the exclusions in the policy. to see if there's a requirement to maintain those security measures going forward. So just again, to be aware that if you are amending your IT security provisions or looking to make changes, just need to check to see if that will have any impact on your cyber insurance cover going forward. So, what can you do to try and reduce the costs of your cyber insurance? And I suppose one of the key ones is to engage with your IT provider. Engagement with your IT provider is key, and it's the first line of protection against an attack. It's not a matter of IT protection or taking out insurance. Both work in tandem with each other to make sure you have the best level of protection. Now, what I often do as well when a client or a new client is looking for cyber insurance cover, I'll often speak to the IT provider directly when we're looking to complete the proposal form, and sometimes even link them in with the underwriter from the insurance company. And the reason being that you as professionals and you as principals of your business, or indeed whoever it may be that's looking to get the quotation, you're not going to have the level of security awareness or the understanding of the technology that your IT security person or persons are going to have. So it's better to let them complete those sections of the form which are more technically minded than the other areas of the form. And it's to your benefit then as well, because at least they're able to explain to the insurer what additional elements of protection that your business has against cyber threats. Now, we mentioned multi-factor authentication earlier, and this is almost a prerequisite for insurance companies now who provide cyber insurance. So if you don't have MFA or multi-factor authentication, it can be very difficult to get insurance cover, but it can also be at a very high cost if you do get it. Okay, so multi-factor authentication, as we mentioned earlier, is an authentication method that requires the user provide two or more verification factors to gain access to a resource, such as an application, an online account, or indeed a VPN. So an everyday example of this is if you're on holidays and you try to log on to your Gmail or Facebook account, it may ask you for your password, but also for an input code, which is sent to a mobile number associated with the account. So again, if you're unsure about how this works, just speak to your IT security guys, speak to your insurance broker to get an idea of the impact that's going to have on your cyber insurance. Now, fund transfer authorization is another very important one, and this is one we've mentioned already a couple of times. So before transferring funds or making changes to a third party's bank details, always make sure you have a process in place to authenticate the information. So this could be as straightforward as simply calling the third party to confirm the details verbally and noting that. So insurers will want to see your company is aware of the threats faced when sending money electronically. And if you can show that you have that process in place, it's going to be favorable in terms of the review. If you say you don't have a process for it, again, it could make it even difficult to get the insurance cover at all. The database encryption is also very important, especially when sensitive data is held. And this means data is encrypted while it is stored in databases. And if implemented correctly, this can stop malicious actors from being able to access sensitive data if they gain access to a database. Now, a culture of awareness for me is a very, very important one as well. I mean, as we alluded to earlier, certain insurers believe that up to 90% of cyber incidents their root cause can be traced back to simply human error. And by having a culture of awareness of IT security issues, you can help try and prevent that. So by using, for example, like phishing tests every month, if that's something which you can bring in with your IT security personnel, whereby a phishing email is sent out to your staff, and those who click on it and haven't tried to follow the correct procedures, there's a log taken of it then, and you can check the data. Though that employee then will receive an email saying they shouldn't have opened that email at all. And it just means that people begin to get more aware and start looking for the certain elements of an email which maybe point out that it isn't from a trusted source. So, for example, when an email comes in and the name says Microsoft, or it doesn't quite look right. There might be spelling mistakes or something like that. And when you hover your mouse over the email, suddenly you see it's Microsoft at a whole gobbledygook email account. So it's just to have that awareness and to spread that awareness amongst staff so that everyone knows the protocols to follow and knows the little things to be aware of when cyber threat is being faced. And lastly, spend time in your proposal form. And this is the same, say, with your professional indemnity insurance as well. Spending time on your form and providing as much information as possible to insurers is to your benefit, as they will get a better understanding of your business and a better understanding of the types of protocols you have in place as well. And as I mentioned, it can be very beneficial to simply link your IT provider in with your insurance broker and indeed sometimes the underwriter to complete the proposal form. That can be of huge, huge benefit. So, guys, we're coming towards the end of this this session, and in a moment, I'm going to stop sharing just to see if we have any questions to answer. But if you do want any more information on this topic, or you want to discuss any of the topics that we covered, or the exclusions or coverages that we've noted here on this topic, feel free to reach out and feel free to give us a call. My own details are there, or indeed you can call 091 759 5000, 091 759 5000, and speak to a member of our team about cyber insurance. We're very passionate about it. We're a company that see ourselves as client advocates, and it's a type of coverage that can only benefit businesses when the worst case scenario happens. So I'm going to stop sharing my screen now, and I'm just going to check and see if we have any questions from anybody. So we have got a question in here now at the moment from Peter. So how's pricing and premium determined? So there's a couple of elements to this, Peter, and I suppose the key starting point for pricing is fee income or turnover. So in a very, very similar way to how professional indemnity insurance is calculated, cyber insurers will look at the previous year's declared fee income. Now, most will look at the last year's declared fee income. Some also look at the projected fee income. But that's the key starting point, and a rate is applied to that. Now, outside of fee income, they will also look at certain other areas in terms of the type of IT security infrastructure you have in place. So those that are ticking more boxes in terms of having certain protocols and certain systems in place are going to have the rate reduced in comparison to those who, say, don't have multi-factor authentication, don't have a process for confirming bank details, etc. And then, of course, it depends on the limits that you're looking for as well. So if you're going for a lower limit of indemnity, and say €250,000 total limit, that's going to be cheaper than if you're buying a policy with a limit of €10 million. So they're sort of the key areas in terms of how pricing has been determined. But typically speaking, I mean, a cyber insurance policy can start from roughly about €1,200, maybe a little bit less as well. And that would include an element of cybercrime. That would be for a lower limit of indemnity as well, but that's typically where they start from and can increase from there depending on the variabilities of your business, the fee income, and the type of coverage which you're looking for. So I don't think we have any other questions coming in at the moment. But again, as I said, if we do, please feel free to reach out to myself, to reach out to Chartered Accountants Ireland as well. So I just want to say a sincere thank you to all the attendees this morning. Really appreciate you joining. I hope you're not quite as cold as I am at the minute. I'm absolutely freezing, as you can tell, with the fleece on right now. So hopefully everybody warms up a little bit, and I hope you found this morning beneficial. And as I mentioned, if you have any questions at all going forward, or you want to clarify anything whatsoever, please feel free to reach out to myself or reach out to Chartered Accountants Ireland, who can put you in contact with us. So look, thanks very much, everybody. Thank you for joining, and hopefully we'll be talking to you again soon.